Hello again, and so today what we're going to do is we are going to be going through Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is where we first get introduced to the Roman family. We won't be doing the entire chapter this time around. We'll be finishing it next week. What I plan to be doing from now on is to get through a chapter roughly every 2 weeks. I think that is a good spacing out of everything. It allows you to read and reread the chapter and really take everything in, which reminds me, if you are not reading the chapter except just simply when I assign it, then things might be easy now. I'm not sure how easy they are, especially with how a lot of kids in my class are doing, but it will get more difficult as we go along. So yes, please read and reread the chapter until, I would say that the amount of reading you need to do before you know that you don't need to read anymore is actually until you can basically read through the whole thing without having to think about it in English, if that makes any sense. So if you can read a sentence like Julius via Romanus est, as you see here, and just know simply that means what it means, which is Julius is a Roman man, then you know you're good. But if you need to think, okay, wait, what does vir mean? What does Romanus mean? Oh, right, that's right. And then after looking it up and all, yeah. So I would say that is my word of advice. Please do read and reread the chapter. If you can get everything just intuitively the first or second time, that's great. But otherwise, I really do need everyone to be continuously reading and rereading the chapter, because if you don't, we're going to get through to like chapter 7 by December, and you're just, there will be too many vocabulary words that you just don't recognize, and it will make everything feel slow, and you have to look up each and every single word and just all of that. And we want to avoid that. We want to make this as easy and as clean as possible. So yes, please keep rereading the chapters. It does make, I'm sure that the chapters get slightly more boring the more times you read them, but I'm sorry, that's just how it has to be. So turning to page 17, you will see here the Grammatica Latina. Now, in the last chapter, the lesson was about singular versus plural, and it showed how on the one hand you have fluvius versus fluvii, where fluvii is the plural and fluvius is the singular. Then you have words like insula versus insulae, where insula is the singular, insulae is the plural. Then you have oppidum versus oppida, where oppidum is the singular and oppida is the plural. Now, you might wonder why there are 3 different singulars and plurals in Latin when more or less there's only really one for English, namely adding an s at the end of the word. So one book, many books, or many examples can be given. And the reason is that in Latin, every single noun has a gender, has a set gender. Now, pronouns and adjectives, they don't have set genders. Instead, they copy the gender of whatever noun they are referring to or modifying. In that context, you would always have the same gender for the adjective as the noun that you are currently talking about. So, with the Grammatica Latina, this chapter is explaining the concept of gender, basically. So you have the masculine, the feminine, and the neuter, or the masculinum, the femininum, and the neutrum. Neutrum means neither in Latin, so you have the male, the female, and the neither, basically, is what the genders are. And if you need an English sort of comparison, it's basically how it is with he, she, and it. So you still have genders in English, which more or less correspond to the genders in Latin. It's just that we restrict them primarily to those pronouns. All right, so you have the first part, A, servus est vocabulum masculinum. So servus, the Latin word servus, is a masculine vocabulary word. And you can tell this by the fact that it says servus. You have the us at the end of it. The us indicates that the noun is a masculine noun. So just by looking at the word, you can tell, oh, that must be a masculine noun. So if I were to put an adjective with it, then then the adjective would have to take the form of a masculine noun as well. That isn't super important right now, but it will be important eventually when we start talking about different what are called different declensions, which are ways of sort of changing the ending of the nouns and the adjectives. So then for B, you have ancilla est vocabulum femininum, basically ancilla, which means, so servus is a male servant, or really a male slave, whereas ancilla is a female slave. So ancilla est vocabulum femininum. Ancilla is a feminine vocabulary word. And then oppidum is a neuter vocabulary word. And then you can see here that there are a bunch of different examples that they give of the different genders for each, a bunch of different vocabulary words for each gender. So you have filius, dominus. Then you have words like puer and vir, which were introduced in this chapter, and also liber. And that those are also masculine. So as you can see right here, it says that us, both the us and the ending make it a masculine noun. Then you have vocabula feminina. These are all words that just start with a, and so you have femina, puella, filia, domina, so on and so forth. And so the feminum is you can tell it's feminine by the fact that it has an a at the end of it. And then you have words like oppidum, imperium, vocabulum, capitulum, exemplum, so on and so forth, and they all end in So is the sort of mark of a neuter noun. A is the mark of a feminine noun, and then us, or sometimes the r at the end of the word, is the mark of a masculine noun. Now, you're introduced to the singular and plural for each gender in the last chapter, and similarly you're taught why there are different singulars and plurals. However, those are all for what is called the nominative case, and I'll draw up so here is basically a diagram talking about all the different cases. And you can see here that across the board, all the endings for all the different nouns that you've been introduced to all are from what's called the nominative case. Now, the nominative case indicates that the word is either the subject or it's talking about the subject. So something like Sicilia insula est. Sicily is an island. So Sicily is in the nominative case because it's the subject, and insula is in the nominative case because it is describing the subject. Basically, it's saying that Sicily is an island. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that something needs to be in the nominative case to describe the subject, or that everything in the nominative case is either the subject or it's describing the subject. But with something like the word est or sunt, so basically with a verb of being, so both est and sunt are is versus are, then that's when you have something where the subject is being described by what else is in the nominative case. But that isn't the only case in the Latin language. You see, you also have what's called the genitive case, and then you also have all these other cases, but those you'll get introduced to those later. The accusative is actually introduced next chapter, I believe, but for now, what we need to do is we need to talk about the genitive case, and what the genitive case does is it describes possession. So going back to here, you see Julius Dominus servi est. So Julius, so that's Julius. Then Dominus, which means Lord or Master, or Julius Dominus, Master est. So Julius is the master. Master of who? He's the master of the servant, the servi. So servi, by having an e at the end, this isn't a plural, it is instead of the genitive case. And so the way you would translate or think about the genitive case of the sentence is you have a nominative, and then with the genitive, you when you're translating it, it's sort of, you put of in front of whatever is in the genitive case. So in this case, it would be Julius is the lord of the servant. You can see with servi, you put of in front of it when you're translating it into English. The same holds true for the next sentence, which is just the same thing, but instead it becomes plural. So Julius Dominus servorum est. So Julius is the master of the servants. You can see it's the same thing. So it becomes of the servants in the plural, where it's just of the servant in the singular, but you always put the of in front of it. So the next you can see Aemilia domina ancilla est. So Aemilia is the lady, but it still means master or lord of some sort, but lord usually is a masculine word in English. So the master or lady of the house. So Aemilia est domina ancilla. So Aemilia is the master of the woman servant, or the handmaid in older English, but woman servant basically. And then that's the singular. So ancilla is both the plural. You'll notice that servi, that could also mean servants if this were nominative. Similarly, ancilla could mean handmaids or woman servants if it was in the nominative, but we know it's in the genitive because of the fact that there's already a nominative in the sentence, and you can see that it is singular. So Aemilia and domina are both singular nouns, and so that we know that ancilla can't also be a nominative plural. So we have to conclude, okay, this is obviously a genitive. So Aemilia domina ancilla est. Aemilia is the master of the servant, of the female servant. Then Aemilia domina ancillarum est. So Aemilia is the master of the woman servants. So as you can see, it's a lot easier to tell if it's genitive if it's plural, but that is just a difficulty. But then you come down to neutrum or neuter. You have de est prima littera vocabuli dominus. So D is the first letter of the vocabulary word dominus. So you can still see that you would translate it of the vocabulary word. So make sure if you do write down a translation, you don't need to do that, or when you're translating it in your head, which is what I would more suggest doing rather than writing down a translation of the entire chapter. That would just be, I think it would be a waste of time, but if you really want to do it, you can do that. So de est prima littera vocabuli dominus. Make sure whenever you're thinking about that, if you need to turn it into English, turn it into of the vocabulary word, of the servant, of the female servant, and all that stuff.